leadership is critical. And all leaders need to look at themselves in the mirror and say, am I the type of person that you would follow? Do I genuinely believe? Can I create a vision for the future that is exciting? If you can't do that, you're not a leader. And the number one leadership test is turnaround.
Yeah, welcome back to the Business Behind Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney, and today we've got an absolute treat for you and something that I'm very excited about, and that is the idea of turning around a business. And not just turning around a business, but turning around a business so that it becomes a fun, enjoyable environment which you want to stay in. And our guest today is certainly an entrepreneur with the experience of creating fun, enjoyable businesses. And at age 77, still owning and operating businesses and thriving, he's certainly got some advice for us today on how we can achieve that. Our guest is Mike Dunlop, who's helped restore over 34 companies in various stages of financial distress back to profitability. And we love those kinds of stories because we want to know more about it. We're all under a bit of pressure at the moment with business conditions and coming out of 4 years of COVID, but Mike's got some great advice for us today. But just a bit more background on Mike. Arrived in America, and I'm trying to get what the date, and Mike can fill us in, but with $300 to his name and no qualifications, and yet he's been able to grow some great businesses, including QPM Aerospace, which has grown to over $30 million in sales. It's designed Net Inspect, which is the most widely used aerospace quality management system in the world. Owns 4 patents, which is great because we're all about innovation and thriving in the business community. Has written a number of books. Is a public speaker. Has his own podcast called The Art of the Turnaround. I just think we just need to start hearing from Mike. So Mike Dunlop, welcome to the microphone.
Thank you very much.
Look, it's great to have you here. And I've enjoyed just the time that we've spent prior to recording, catching up about some of the things that you're excited about. Now, you're age 77, you're still thriving. You tell me you're working in 3 businesses at the moment, 12 hours a day, two businesses. But you're loving what you do, and there's an excitement as I switched on the video and saw you. There's this absolute excitement about what you do. It's just glowing everywhere. Why are you so excited about businesses?
Well, number one, I enjoy the type of business. So I have a new manufacturing company, and we're making precision components for the Starlink satellite that Elon Musk is putting up. So we make actually the control mechanism of the geopositioning, and it's incredibly tight tolerances, very difficult to make. And we've made over 500 of them. So there are 500 satellites going around being controlled by the mechanism that we created in our new company. So it's the excitement of technology. It's the excitement of working with younger people. One of the joys that I have is most of my employees are in their late 20s, early 30s, some in their early 20s, and really being able to mentor them and excite them about the future and to eliminate all the perennial gloom and doom that the world is going to come to an end. And what I tell them is, in the last 50 years, not one single prediction of gloom and doom that I've heard in 50 years has actually happened. In most cases, exactly the opposite. So when you hear about gloom and doom, completely ignore it. It's not going to happen. And really start enjoying your life and selecting work that you're passionate about. You spend 82% of your conscious life working. So you really need to choose it very carefully, whatever it is, whether it's working for someone else or working for yourself. The product that you're in needs to be fascinating for you. It needs to have a future, and it needs to be enjoyable. And then the act of working ceases to be work. And, you don't want to stop. I mean, you have a beautiful box of chocolates. You just want to keep eating the chocolates. You don't want to quit after one. So it's creating that environment.
Yeah, and look, a lot of what you've just said goes, I guess, against the grain of what I hear from a lot of people. but I hear it as reasons why their business isn't being successful and why they're not achieving, in that they need more resources, they need, they haven't got the qualifications, things are tough at the moment. I can't get good staff. The younger generation doesn't want to work. I hear all of those reasons why business is hard, but what you've just told me is complete opposite to that. So what are we missing?
It's the effective leadership and the ability to really encourage people. I mean, if you're the head of a company, you have to lead. And no one wants to see the captain inspecting the lifeboats. That doesn't give the passengers very much confidence. So you have to lead, and you have to lead with confidence, and you have to have a situation that you exude this confidence in the tone of your voice. And one of the things that always happens, and I always tell people, that the tone of your voice is infinitely more important than the actual words you use. So if you're positive, for instance, if you think something is a really good idea and you say, I think it's a really good idea, it's probably not. If you say, I think it's a really good idea, then you actually believe it. And people listen very, very closely to the tone of your voice, whether you're excited, whether you're engaged, whether you're enthusiastic. So the very first chapter in the book, and not to promote the book, but leadership is critical. And all leaders need to look at themselves in the mirror and say, am I the type of person that you would follow? Do I genuinely believe? Can I create a vision for the future that is exciting? If you can't do that, you're not a leader. And the number one leadership test is turnaround. If no one's following you, you're not a leader. So the first thing to do is to check whether there's anybody following you. So a lot of people go into business, they look at it very mechanically, but it's infinitely more emotional. I've seen poor products become very successful with passionate leaders. I've seen good products fail miserably with miserable leadership.
Yeah, look, I love the way that you just expressed that, because the leadership and the style of leadership can be infectious. If you've got a bad leader, or a leader who's not engaged with their team or with their product or passionate, you're not going to get the results. You're not going to motivate your team. They're not going to want to be motivated, because it looks like you're not motivated in what you're doing.
Yeah, you're just doing it mechanically, and it has to be a passion. And what I've found is that young people are desperately looking for passionate leaders to follow. And if you can exude that, they'll line up at your door and they won't ever leave. We have virtually no turnover. And we're probably a mile from the Google headquarters in the Northwest. We're 2 miles from Microsoft, and we're 4 miles from the Amazon headquarters. Every one of our employees could be hired in a minute. So we have to create an environment that's different from theirs, that's exciting. You have to engage with your employees. You have to explain what you're doing. You have to explain the purpose. All successes you have to share with the entire company. You have to incorporate everything that they did. One of the reasons that SpaceX is very, very successful, the Elon Musk, is that they have a definitive end to all their work, and that's a rocket launching. You have to almost create that rocket launch effect where everybody's around, everybody's participated, the rocket goes up, it's successful, and everybody is just ecstatic. And if you look at the films of their launches, the cutaway is to their employees, and you see these extraordinary young people just exhilarated. And that's the environment you have to create. It's competitive, it's difficult, but you have to believe. And then you'll have no problem. And then you convince other people, like financing sources, to lend you money. It's all part of the same mix. And all the alibis of why you can't do it are actually really focused more on leadership than anything else.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say it's all about leadership. So some of our recent podcasts, we've been talking about some of the symptoms or issues with employment in the current age. So particularly the post-COVID era, talking about quiet quitting and the incidence of burnout. And in both of those discussions, particularly, it's come back to, it's not an employee issue, it's a leadership issue. So I think what I'm hearing is that as a business owner and a leader, you have a huge responsibility to create a great working environment, because if you don't, you're not going to attract the right kind of people who are going to be energized about your product.
Yeah, and you don't share your problems with them. Basically, solve them yourself. When you're in the public, they're watching every single thing you do. So one of the things we did with COVID, I holed up in our office. I was the only one in the office, and I redid the entire office suite to make it world class. And so when people came back, they said, wow, this is fantastic. This is unbelievable. And we don't have any problem with people at home. We have very flexible, people can work from home. And but they don't. They work in the office because they really enjoy the other people they work with. They enjoy the environment. They enjoy our success, and it just is creating that environment that it is magnetic, and you don't have to worry. I mean, we don't lose employees. We keep our employees. My head of IT with my software company was actually a student at the University of Washington, where I gave a talk. And he asked a couple of really good questions. And he came up to me afterwards and said, did I have an intern program? And I said, I do now. And he was our first intern, and he's been with me 12 years. He can get a job anywhere in the world, anytime he wants. He's a phenomenal young man, but he's been with me for 12 years. So it's the bird in the cage with the door open. If the bird is in the cage, it must like the cage, but you got to leave the door open. And so to see whether the bird really likes the cage, not that I would call our company a cage, but that's the sort of metaphor of where our home is. And we've had a number of employees, 12, 13, 14 years. And so it is that environment, and it is the responsibility of the founder of the company, the owner of the company, to create that environment. And that needs to be their number one task. Forget about accounting, forget about sales, forget about everything else. Their number one task is to create the environment that they would like to work in, and an environment that would make them feel really good. And after that, it's almost self-perpetuating. You don't have to worry about all the things that you talked about, because you don't have turnover in staff, you don't have training issues, you don't have these issues. You have this incredible loyal cadre of people who will go through a wall for you. And if you did have a problem, they're the first ones who step in to help, to offer to reduce their salaries. I've had that in a number of companies where we've had some problems. The aerospace company, after 9/11, we lost 50% of our sales in the month after 9/11. We had to regroup, but I had a fabulous team. They worked out what we had to do to stay profitable. We made some very hard decisions collectively, and we were profitable in 2002 as an aerospace company that was just not heard of. But because we had the core team that I could completely rely on, and it's in good times and bad times. So it's kind of your insurance policy as an owner, because every company is going to experience tough times, is to have that team that is not going to abandon you when you need the most. So it's an insurance policy, it's an enjoyment policy, it's a longevity policy. You don't need an HR department if people are not leaving the company, because you don't have to replace anybody.
No, and if you create that great environment, you don't have all those turnover issues. And it's often been said that your employees, your team, are your greatest asset. It sounds like you've cracked the key on how to create or maximize the enjoyment to start with, but then the enjoyment leads to the productivity and the innovation in your businesses.
Well, I think there's a level of supreme confidence you have to have, and that's what has to be displayed. People follow confident leaders. They don't follow doubting Thomases. And if you walk around with a scowl on your face, everybody is convinced that something terrible is going to happen. So if you're going to scowl, do it in your office, close the door and scowl on your own, or scowl in the mirror. But it's your public figure, and everybody's watching you. So if you walk by someone and you don't say good morning, they think they've done something wrong. So you have to be omnipresent of your your presence in the company and really think about the things that you do. Think about the meetings. Think about how you explain the future. Talk about the future vision. And I've always explained that a leader is someone who can take a group of people at the bottom of a mountain and describe the view from the top of the hill in such clarity and such enjoyment that everybody wants to climb the mountain. And you don't have to force them to. They just want to. They want to experience. So part of it is painting a picture. And the future is always a very important picture, because in order to keep people motivated, you got to kind of raise it up to have the shining light on the hill. And then people will go up the hill and they'll walk with you because you've given them something, an incentive, a future. But if you don't appear to have a future, they don't want to have one with you. So again, it's almost an acting job, but it's better not to be an actor. It's better to feel passionately about your company, that you're doing some good, that you are different, that you can do better than everybody else. You can be a world leader, and really raise the stakes on what you think the company is going to be. Then people say, wow, this sounds really exciting. I'll put my everything into this because it's going to be around and it sounds like this is going to be a lot of fun. So it is as much psychology and putting yourself in the position of employee of how you would like to be motivated and how you're demotivated. And I see a lot of CEOs, a lot of business owners, everything that they do is kind of demotivating. And they have to, that's how you change. And that's really the basis. When I put the title, The Art of the Turnaround, it's infinitely more a psychology than it is a mechanical accounting process of paying the bills and making sure you increase your cash. It's more how you inject the motivation into the business.
So I like the way you've described it, and obviously that's the title of the book, The Art of the Turnaround. So you've worked with a large number of businesses to help them achieve a turnaround. And I don't want to give away too many secrets of the book because I want our listeners to read it because I think it's got some great value there. But what is the key? I guess the first issue that you address when you deal with a business that's in distress, like the ones that you've worked with?
Well, the first thing is to find out how bad it is and to go away from the denial, which is always the first sort of step. The people deny the business is bad. They give all sorts of rationale, all sorts of external reasons, taxation, the country, the export, whatever it is. There's always a very good reason to deny why the business is bad. And then there's a great denial on how bad it is. So unfortunately, our wonderful friends in the accounting world feel their job is to take bad numbers and make them look good. And so the owners look at the good numbers and say, well, we're not really that bad. And when you deconstruct the financials and do proper forensic accounting, you find out where all the bodies are buried. So part of the early stage is to confront the owners or the shareholders with where it actually is. And they're shock rigid. And then they go to the next stage, which is anger. And then the stage after that is prayer. And the last stage of death is acceptance. So they actually go through that exact pattern. First denying, no, it's not really bad. Then you confront them with it. Then they go nuts. And then they say, well, no one can help us. We need to pray. And then they accept it. And so really the first phase is to get over the denial and get into the anger stage. And having done forensic accounting, the one thing I found about forensic accounting, people don't have much imagination when they come up with fake numbers. They kind of always hide them in the same places. So within a couple of hours of reviewing the financials, I can find where all the bodies are buried, not because I'm smarter than anybody else. It's just everybody else buried the same bodies in the same place. So I know where to go to find the fake numbers or the numbers that don't truly represent what the business is about. So once I've done that, I know where the position is. Like golf, I know where the golf ball lies. And so I've got to hit it from where it lies, not where I'd like it to be. And that allows me to do things uh, enough changes to accommodate where they're actually at rather than where they thought they were. And you can then you sort of move from there. But the first thing is to find out where the business actually is, and a genuine, honest assessment of almost a worst case scenario. And then once you've done that, that's as bad as it's going to get. Everything else is on the upside from there. But that's the early confrontation in the first couple of days of a turnaround. And luckily, I'm 6'3" and was a rugby player for 17 years. So I have a sort of fairly commanding physique. And so I can be fairly abrupt when I need to be. I survived in the scrum for 17 years. So facing some angry business owner telling me that his business is not as bad as he thought it was doesn't really have any impact on me. And so once we've got the confrontation done, then we start plotting the strategy on all the steps that need to take place in order to get them back in the place that they should be financially and organizationally, and really start infusing the enjoyment in the process of recovery. Kind of like repairing an older car. Initially it's really hard work and you think there's no place that you can't find rust and you got to do this and but then things start to come together. And one of the greatest joys is seeing when it's completely perfect again. That's like a complete renaissance. And that's why I did it for 17 years. That's why every 6 months I do a new company. It was quasi addictive. And so that was why I learned a lot during that period. There's nothing like being a sort of corporate undertaker to learn all about business. It was like 17 years of MBA programs. So although I didn't have the qualifications, I had a lot of experience related to business.
So when you mention turnaround, the way you've described it is, I think, very different to the way most people would respond when they hear the word turnaround. So a lot of people are thinking a financial turnaround or a tax turnaround or the accounting turnaround. And as an accountant myself, I know very easily when I see a set of financial statements which have been
doctored,
manipulated to get a better tax position or to impress a lender or to cover over an issue. But when you actually delve deeper and uncover the true picture, like you say, where the business actually is very different to the perception of where the owner thinks it is, and in a lot of cases, worse than they think. So,
in some cases, they've been forced to do it with bank covenants, and so the covenant ratio needs to be this. So there's all sorts of manipulation and strangulation of the numbers that are needed in order to meet the covenants. And that is also the wishful thinking of the owner that it's really not as bad as it seems. And so it's sort of quasi-therapeutic for him to see the numbers rather than to be confronted with cold water poured down the back of his neck and where it actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other point that you raised, you raised a number of good points, but the fact that you're saying playing the golf ball from where it lies, not where you want it to be. I see a lot of strategies and recovery programs designed for the business to be starting from 10 feet off the ground, but really they're 10 feet under the ground.
Yeah, it's one of those things you have to really reconstruct the business and confront the owner with where things actually are. And one of the tricks I used to do when I did the turnarounds, I would turn up a day before the owner knew I was coming and before they'd had an opportunity to put all the toys away. And I would apologize profusely and say, I'm sorry, I got the dates wrong. But I'm here, I might as well start. And you could see the blood drain from their face. So I was completely unpredictable. They had no idea what I was going to do. They had no idea how I was going to do it. They had no idea what my authority was. They suspected that the bank was behind me, although the bank said, we just recommended him. We're not requiring you to hire him. But there was this sort of palpable fear that they weren't quite sure what I was going to do. So that allowed me to affect changes with authority probably more so than most turnaround specialists. I learned to confuse, I learned to disorient, and I learned to get the information that was actually happening as quickly as possible. One of the techniques I used, the first interview I always had with a company was the person who'd been with the company longest. And I said, tell me the history. Tell me where it started to go wrong. And they'd say, well, the company was fine under the father, then the son took over and he expanded in 10 states. And I said, yeah, I've kind of seen that story before. Yes, now I know where it started to go wrong. Now I know how we have to regroup to kind of get back to the level, the organizational structure that worked before. And the son wanted to show the father how he could really grow the business, and the old man really didn't know what he was doing. And I probably had 10 or 15 of those in my career. And so, again, there was all these sort of fun dynamics that go through. And interesting, one of the ones, the big ones I did, the second company I did, rescued it right from practically from the bailiff's hands. That company I did the turnaround probably 45 years ago. The company was recently sold for $640 million. And so the family finally bailed out, and the grandchildren from the people that I worked with finally decided that enough was enough, and they sold the business. But I felt that was a nice bookend from a family that was within weeks of going bankrupt to now they probably have way too much money, and it probably won't do them that much good anyway. So it was a real sort of culmination of a very long period, and can show what can happen if a business is well run.
The art of the turnaround, obviously you've laid everything out in a 10-step guide in your book. How do our listeners get a hold of the book? Where's the best place for them to look?
The website is theartoftheturnaround.com. So just the whole word, The Art of the Turnaround. On that, you'll find you can buy the book from Amazon. It's selling really well, which is nice. 100% of the proceeds go to 2 educational charities that I support. So it's not going into my pension fund. I don't need a pension fund because I'm going to keep on working. But these are 2 wonderful educational charities that I support here in Bellevue. And the blogs I think you'll find interesting. They're about all sorts of subjects. I've got one called The Serendipity of Golf, how the wonderful things that have happened to me on the golf course. I've got entrepreneurship in retirement. I've got the Boeing Renaissance, how Boeing is turning around. And then I've got the podcasts, which are kind of a reflection of the book in a number of podcasts. And then the second season is more philosophical, related to mentorship, stewardship, and really the responsibility of owners have for their legacy and what they can do to protect their legacy, and how they can, when they're successful, their almost obligation to mentor either other businesses or employees, and how much enjoyment that is in the mentorship aspect. So it's a broad philosophical approach. As you get older, you tend to get more and more philosophical, but I think there are a lot of practical aspects in there. And one of the advantages of being older, you can be 100% honest, and you can call it exactly as it is. And then if you're lucky enough to become very wealthy as well, then you really have no adversaries. You can say exactly what you want. You try and be polite. You don't have to be rude, but you don't have to hold anything back, and you can be entirely honest. And I think that's in the talks that I give at the University of Washington here in Seattle, which is kind of strange. I do 4 or 5 different lecture series a year. And here is for someone who didn't finish high school. It's kind of odd to be a key lecturer at a major university in the United States. And no one has asked me to date what my qualifications are. I seem to talk with authority, and they kind of leave it at that.
So, Mike, I've really enjoyed our conversation today, because you've shown me so many, I guess you've unlocked a lot of ideas, and I'm just thinking about a difficult conversation I have to have with one of my clients about some of the horrors embedded in the financial records that I've been granted and what that means. But I'm actually looking forward to that conversation now after hearing your approach and some of the key aspects of how we can turn around a business and create a really enjoyable business that we don't want to leave. We want to keep working, and we want to create a great culture there. So, Mike, I'm really appreciative of your time and the knowledge that you've shared, and I'd encourage our listeners to find out more, get a hold of the book, The Art of the Turnaround, and listen to the podcast. Now, the podcast is also called The Art of the Turnaround.
Yes, we're on season 2. So I think there are 12 episodes. I was lucky enough, my cousin is a BBC television reporter in England. So I flew him over to do the podcast. And so he knows how to ask the hard questions. And just like a BBC journalist, he tried to find everything wrong with what I was saying, but eventually I convinced him. But he's a wonderful cousin. And so it was a very balanced podcast, having a professional person asking the questions.
Yep, that's great. That's absolutely great. So look, The Art of the Turnaround, it's available in book form. Also, there's plenty of blogs on the website, and Mike's recorded some of his thoughts and follow-up ideas, I guess, on the podcast, which is also called The Art of the Turnaround. I encourage you to listen to those. And as always, we'll put links to those key resources in the show notes for you to follow. So don't worry about pulling over the car right now. You can look that up in your leisure. But I encourage you to check out those resources. And look, if you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, please share it with another business owner that really needs to hear this message, because we want to get that out and help as many business owners as we can. So, Mike, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great. Thanks. Enjoyed it as well.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Business Behind Your Business. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and valuable for your business journey. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favourite platform. Share it with fellow business owners who could benefit, and send in your burning questions because we love hearing from you. Missed any of our previous episodes or looking for additional resources to help grow your business? Head over to our website at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. There you'll find our full archive of past episodes, along with show notes, transcripts, and links to valuable resources mentioned in each episode. Your journey to business success continues at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. Until next time, stay inspired, stay informed, and keep building the business of your dreams.